Is the second day of the trial, but first day of jury selection, and just now you just heard that the first juror in this case has been selected. We know that they're a scientist, a chemist of some kind. Again, in case you're just joining us, those potential jurors, even when there are jurors sitting on the jury for this case, they're not going to be shown on camera. Their identity is not going to be revealed. You're just going to hear the sound of their voice. So far this morning, we have our first juror in this case selected. So let's talk a little bit about this process. The potential jurors come in, they get a reading of the rules from Judge Cahill on what they can expect through this process, and then they're brought in one by one for a line of questioning to see if they can be an impartial juror in this case. So the first juror came in and they actually ended up being dismissed. There were a few factors related to that. Part of it on the juror on their questionnaire they were sent before they were called in for questioning said that they wanted to be on the jury because they thought that the murder of George Floyd was unjust. Ultimately, that juror was dismissed. They brought in juror number 2, and it starts with the defense, Eric Nelson, getting to ask them questions. He started his questioning asking, hey, if I met you at a party, what are a few things you'd tell me about yourself? And that juror said that he's passionate about being a scientist, a chemist, and he likes the outdoors. So that led defense attorney Eric Nelson to create a line of questioning to learn about how this potential now jurors' experience with science could impact how they sit on a jury and how they hear the facts of this case. So take a listen to what the juror had to say.
The details from both sides, right? Agreed?
Yeah.
And then can come to a conclusion about who is telling the truth, who is at fault, those types of determinations.
Yes.
Okay. And so when these two opposing sides would be kind of there, right? How would you, what tools would you listen to other than just having an open dialogue, right? How can you tell if someone's lying, I guess is the question.
It's a hard question. I rely, maybe this is going back now, backtracking to science, but I rely on facts and logic and what's in front of me. You know, if a kid says that he got punched by another kid on the nose, and I look at the kid's nose and there's no blood coming out of his nose, or it doesn't look like it's been punched, maybe, that suggests the kid wasn't punched on the nose. I can only rely on what's in front of me, and I can only use what's presented to me in that dispute to resolve it.
Okay. So let me just draw on your example that you gave. Do you think that every punch on the nose results in a bloody nose or apparent physical injury?
No.
Okay. And so simply because someone said they were punched in the nose and you don't see the physical evidence of it, are you saying you would consider that person to not be telling the truth?
I would say that, again, the information in front of me, I have to make a decision one way or another. Mm-hmm. And so I rely on the evidence I have to make my best, the best decision I can.
Okay.
You can never, I don't suppose I can ever truly know if a person's lying or not. That would require me to be in their head.
So, sometimes when I've examined scientists as potential jurors in cases, there is a level of information that's needed in order to formulate an opinion. Would you agree with that?
Opinion and fact are important distinctions for me.
Okay.
I can have an opinion, but I can't necessarily especially if we're talking about a court of law here, or me as a potential juror. If I have an opinion on something in real life, I have to be careful not to. I guess the criteria for me determining that opinion in real life are different than forming an opinion as a member of a jury.
Okay. How so?
Well, there are strict standards about, and rules set that, the judge outlined to us about, what were the words you used? I'm sorry if it's inappropriate for me to ask. Reasonable, beyond a reasonable doubt. Right, maybe those criteria don't apply to opinions in your day-to-day life, but they do here.
Okay, good. Have you, in that vein, can you think of a circumstance where you formed an opinion about something and then later evidence comes along and upsets that opinion?
Yeah.
Can you give me an example of that? I know it's put you on the spot.
Yeah, I mean, it's fine. We keep going back to science, but I mean, science isn't a set of facts, right? Science is a set of theories that have been proven, and over time, more evidence is presented. But at one point, the world's leading scientists thought that the sun revolved around the Earth, and then more evidence came to light, and their theory was adjusted. Same applies to me.
Okay. All right, I'm going to turn to your questionnaire and just follow up with some questions on your questionnaire. So the first question asked you to kind of detail what you knew
of the questioning
about
that juror number 2 went through. You heard that was defense attorney Eric Nelson asking some of those questions. So again, this is how lawyers try to learn more about these potential jurors' background and how their background, in this case, profession as a scientist, could impact how they're going to hear this case. Something Nelson also asked this potential juror about was, are you going to be able to separate what you know about science with when the experts come in? Because you're not going to, as a juror, have an opportunity to question these experts to learn more information. You're going to have to rely on our line of questioning. Will you be able to separate that? Will you be bringing some of your own bias or own knowledge into the courtroom? When it comes to these scientists who are going to be called to the stand to talk about different things like autopsy reports. So those are just some examples of the questions that jurors are going to face, and it's interesting to learn how their particular professions might impact the biases that they could potentially bring into the courtroom. So another thing that jurors are going to be asked a lot about is their past interactions with police, police in general, specifically Minneapolis police as well. This second juror was asked some of those questions about his past experiences with police. And let's take a listen to what he said.
We're on their way.
Okay. Any other incidents that you've had with law enforcement in your life?
Yeah. I mean, nothing big, but
Sure.
Like yesterday when I was pulling in here, my car was blocked by a person who I believed was with the protests or something like that, and I had a conversation with the police officer who helped me get to the parking ramp.
Okay. Nothing about that is going to affect your ability to be fair and impartial in this case, is it?
No.
Okay. Have you ever had a negative experience with law enforcement?
A minor negative experience when I was working at that summer camp that was near a lake, and there was a year where the water was particularly high, and I attempted to turn onto a road that the police had blocked because a car in front of me turned on there and wasn't stopped, but they stopped me, and I was a kid, I was in high school, and they asked some pretty, I don't know if aggressive is the right way to say it, but some pretty aggressive questions to me about why I would do that.
Okay.
Yeah.
And that you had a souring effect on you?
No.
No?
No, it was a long time ago.
Okay. Was that the Minneapolis Police Department?
No, that would have been Orono.
Or
Yeah.
What is your overall perspective of the Minneapolis Police Department as you sit here today?
It's a pretty broad question. I'd say, all of my experiences with them have been positive. I think that, the police department, I'm an advocate for community policing. I don't know, I'm not an expert on a whole lot of
Sure.
policing techniques or, the way that the Minneapolis police is, frankly, because I haven't had a lot of interactions with them. But overall, I'd say that, my personal impression of them is fine, neutral.
When you say you're an advocate for community policing, what do you mean by that?
Just police connecting with their community is what and honestly, again, I have not had a lot of experiences with police, so maybe that's, something that I'd like to change. I'd like to have an opportunity to interact with police more often, maybe.
Okay. So it's fair to say that I think you just said that you're not an expert in policing policies, practices, things
No.
of that nature. And if you hear expert testimony about various policing science, essentially, which it is considered a science, the science of policing, would you be able to differentiate between expert witnesses who may disagree on the appropriate application of that science?
What do you mean by that?
So if you have, think about it in your professional life. You have two scientists looking at the same problem and they reach different conclusions about the science. How do you resolve that scientific dispute?
I look at their evidence, I look at their methodology, and I based on what they presented to me. So I suppose I'd do the same.
Okay. You obviously have some scientific background. You're a chemist. If you hear scientific expert in the form of chemistry, right, and you are listening to an expert witness and you have some knowledge that you've picked up throughout the course of your education or your career, are you going to use what you think is the correct chemistry, or are you going to accept the chemistry as presented in court?
I think my gut reaction to that question would be I would want to find more information.
Okay.
If something that I think I know comes into conflict with something that is presented to me.
So right there, you heard further questioning of juror number 2 by Eric Nelson of the defense, asking about past encounters with police, if they have any already preconceived notions about Minneapolis police. These are questions that also showed up in that questionnaire that jurors were sent with their jury summons. So there is some background knowledge that lawyers have going into this jury questioning of what jurors answered on this 16-page questionnaire. So something that we saw come up with this second juror are questions about support for different organizations and how that could inflict bias on a potential juror. So just another quick reminder, the juror or potential jurors are not going to be shown on camera throughout this trial. So in the videos that we'll be showing you, you'll see the lawyers, you'll see the judge, other people sitting in the courtroom. You will not see this potential juror. But now we're going to show you this line of questioning about different support for organizations.
Two questions in the questionnaire about that I'd like you to expand on a little more. About Black Lives Matter and Blue Lives Matter. With respect to Black Lives Matter, you indicated that you viewed that organization in a somewhat favorable light, and with respect to Blue Lives Matter, you indicated that it was somewhat unfavorable, in your opinion.
Can I get a clarification? So Black Lives Matter, does it specifically say organization in there? Because if that's the case, I'd change my answer.
It doesn't specifically say in the question, but your response was, I don't love, underline the organization itself, parenthetical to extreme.
Yeah, well, sorry, that was louder. Yeah, I don't love the Black Lives Matter organization. I do support the movement, or at least this is, I want to make sure because this is nuanced, but I support that the message that every life should matter equally.
Okay.
I don't believe that the organization Black Lives Matter necessarily stands for that. I do think that the phrase and the movement stand for that.
Okay, and that's you have a favorable response to that, right?
Yes, I think all lives matter equally.
Okay, and you indicate that you kind of see Blue Lives Matter as a counter to the Black Lives Matter. Can you
Judge
expand
Cahill,
on
jury
that?
instructions. Got it.
I think that I don't really see it as a counter, and that's why I think I see it as unfavorable, because I don't see the two as mutually exclusive. I don't see why the counter to Black lives should matter the same as all lives would be police lives matter too, because the whole, in my opinion, the whole point of that is all lives should matter equally, and that should include police.
Do you think that the two, you indicated you don't think that the two are mutually exclusive, so in other words, both and, right?
I suppose, sure.
So that right there gives you a little bit of an impression of the kind of questions that these jurors are going to be facing, and kind of gives you an idea of what lawyers are trying to learn about these different jurors, trying to learn where they stand in their favorability towards different activist organizations, towards different, police support organizations. They're trying to learn this background to see if this juror can be impartial. And of course, lawyers on each side are trying to get jurors on the jury that they think are going to be sympathetic to their case. So again, this was juror number 2, the second juror in this case to be questioned. Juror number 1 was dismissed. This juror, however, by the end of questioning, Judge Cahill said that the juror should come back on the 29th and prepare to sit on this jury for trial.